welcome. Thank you for coming into our Zoom legislative breakfast, or Unbreakfast as we call it this year. I'm Ann Spire. I'm Secretary of the League of Women Voters here in New Britain. And I'm the one who was willing to say, yeah, I'll try and host a Zoom seminar, even though I've never done that before. Mary O'Brien, President of the League, and Mariola Nelson, Treasurer, will be co-hosts today in charge of questions. Our guests this morning are legislators from the New Britain and Bristol areas, reflecting our League's membership. They are Senator Rick Lopes, Senator Henry Martin, Representative Bill Pettit, Representative Bobby Sanchez, and Representative Peter Terziak, we hope will come in soon. We heard from Representative Manny Sanchez that he's unable to attend due to a family problem that came up unexpectedly. His apologies. So thank you all for coming and being part of this adventure. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization of people of all genders. Each year, just as the legislative session begins, we hold this meeting as a chance to hear our legislators' concerns and hopes for the coming session. We hope that it also gives them an opportunity to hear from the League and from the public. This Zoom meeting is in a webinar format. That means the legislators and those running the meeting will be visible on screen. Our co-host League members will ask the questions, some of which come from the State League, some of which come from the New Britain Area League members. If you wish to submit a question as a person attending about a state issue during the forum, please find the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and then type in your question. It should go to our co-hosts, Mary and Mariola, who will add them to the questions we already have. They will select the order of the questions. So now I'd like to ask our panelists to please take a few minutes to introduce themselves, tell us what committees you are assigned to, and what your top priorities for this year's session will be. Then we'll begin the question and answer part of the forum. As this is an informational conversation and not a debate, it won't be timed, nor do we expect everybody to speak on every topic. It's more like a conversation, and we hope that it will be a good one and informative. I'll try to keep it moving and cover as many topics as we can. So, Senator Lopes, I would be very honored to call on you and ask you to lead off with your information. Thanks.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, Rick Lopes, I'm the state senator from the 6th district, which includes all Britain. Look at that, we found Peter.
Thank you, Rick. I've been trying to get on since it started.
All
So
right.
you're from the 6th
I'm glad
district?
you're here.
I am Peter from the 6th senatorial district, which includes all of New Britain, all of Berlin, and a part of Farmington. New to the Senate this year, and the one thing we've learned so far is that it's easier to list sometimes what committees I'm not on than what committees I'm on. So I think as it goes, I'll be on the Appropriations Committee, Planning Development, Higher Ed, Transportation. I'm the chair of Housing, and I think there's one other too.
Education.
Oh yeah, thanks, Bobby. I'm on Bobby's Education Committee as well. So, as you know, obviously a lot of what we're going to be doing this year is going to be revolving around how the pandemic has affected our state and our country and our town. So the pandemic obviously hit us on multiple layers. Obviously a public health front, an economic front, jobs front, housing front, even affecting transportations in weird ways. As the chair of the Housing Committee, obviously I'm going to be working very hard along with the governor's office on dealing with the potential eviction crisis and foreclosure crisis that might be coming up this year. You know, there's been people who have been unable to pay rents, and there's been a rent moratorium for months from both the federal government and from the state government. And there is the fear that as this ends, the first and second week of February, that there may be a problem with a glut of evictions. And the concern on that, obviously, is you may end up a lot of people homeless during the pandemic, which would be bad, but also could have a larger economic impact in that, if we're evicting a whole lot of people all at once, you're creating all sorts of economic havoc, havoc in the courts and havoc just financially from a lot of people being displaced in the housing market. So those are probably my biggest issues for this session coming up. And that's about it. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Rick. Good to have you back in the legislature. Senator Martin, may we hear from you, please?
On mute.
Okay, Senator Martin,
All
excellent.
right, how's that? Better? Thank you. Thank you, everyone for the invite. First of all, sorry for being late. So Rick, you weren't the only one. I had a little difficulty getting on myself. This is my fourth term as representing the 31st District, which is Bristol, Plainville, Harwinton, Thomaston, and Plymouth. My committees that I am on, I am ranking on three. I am on 4 committees, ranking on 3. I'll begin with the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding. The second is the Commerce Committee. The third is Children's Committee. Those are the 3 that I am ranking on, and I stepped down as ranking member of Transportation, and I am now a member of that committee. My objective this session primarily is getting people back to work. I think it looks like we see a light at the end of the tunnel here regarding COVID, but that's not going to take place immediately. We'd like to think that everything will go back to normal within the next month or so. But based on the inoculations that are going to take place, those that are going to be receiving those vaccinations, it's going to take maybe a good part to 3/4 of a year before everyone gets a vaccination, and maybe even a little bit longer than that. And I'm sure Doc Pettit will speak more to that. So my focus will be to help everyone legislatively, whatever we can do legislatively, get those that have lost their jobs, those that are struggling to continue being employers. I think that's probably the most important thing right now, is to get people back to their jobs. Second is, it's always been my campaign, why I ran years ago. And, we've got a continual budget deficit, 4 or 5 out of the last 10 years. We seem to be running into deficits. And that's a signal that we're not doing something right. There's a structural problem. So I think I want to believe that with my position on the Finance Committee, that I'll be able to contribute in trying to, bring some type of balance to our budget, revenue streams, etc., so that we don't have to deal with these budget issues year after year after year. And the last thing that I'll be focusing on is our continued effort in workforce development and apprenticeship programs here in the state of Connecticut. Not only in the manufacturing, which I know New Britain and Bristol in particular, our region, so to speak, is very concentrated with a lot of manufacturing, but there are other sectors that are in the same need of workforce, right? They are, they're a graying population, and I'm included in that. But we know that the finance sector, we know the medical sector, we all know also the tourism sector, and even the trades. There are very few, other than manufacturing sector, apprenticeship programs. And I think we need to start heading into that type of path with our how to introduce various jobs that are very good paying jobs, and not necessarily heading down the path of the all children or students, I should say, need to go to college. I think we've realized that, gee, maybe that's not the right model that we have, but we need to have a hybrid, so to speak, of introducing the career path for not only the continued education and going to college, but also there are other paths in the business sector that you don't need to have a 4-year degree and not costing obviously as much if you only went to 2 years, or even here's an apprenticeship program where we'll lead you to certifications that will give you $80,000-$90,000 jobs. So that's sort of my focus. Thank you for being sorry for being so winded here.
It's interesting to get to know you more. Thank you. Representative Pettit, would you take it on next?
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Spire. Bill Pettit, 22nd, which is all of Plainville and the west side of New Britain, mostly Slater Road down from the north, almost down to New Britain Ave. I am again the ranking member on the Public Health Committee. I have moved from appropriations to join Representative Sanchez on education, and I am on energy and technology. Clearly, my focus has been and will be responses to the pandemic. I've been part of the nursing home and assisted living oversight working group that has met over the past couple months and came up with a variety of recommendations concerning staffing, infection control, facilities. I've been part of the main vaccine advisory group and the science subcommittee, and we are all fielding various questions about eligibility and when people are going to be able to get vaccines. So I think most of my focus is going to be in public health, and a lot of it's going to be related to what kind of funding we have, given President-elect Biden's recently announced plan at 1.9 trillion, I think, with 400 billion aimed at COVID-related issues. I did a little math in my head, and if we get our usual 1.3% on a population basis, that would be about $5 billion to Connecticut, but I don't know how they're going to break up the pie. And that would go a long way, because we're going to need a lot of funding to improve nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, and increase recruitment in areas of nursing assistants and the like, not only for response to the pandemic, but for ongoing care, as we tend to be one of the older states in the nation. So I think the big focus can be there. Obviously, I'm going to take my lead from Representative Sanchez. I think he's done a great job in education. There's obviously many issues related to the pandemic I think we'll continue to discuss. Energy and technology, I think the biggest issues will continue to revolve around energy pricing. My concerns tend to be, I'd like to see some real separation between DEEP and PURA, so that PURA and the OCC, the Office of the Consumer Counsel, can act independently. And I'd like to see the Office of the Consumer Counsel strengthened such that we, myself included, as constituents, have a more solid representation at the state level in the interplay between the companies that provide the energy and deliver it and the cost. So it's going to be a busy session for sure. Thank you, Mrs. Spire.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Pettit. Next in the list is Representative Bobby Sanchez. We'd love to hear from you.
Good morning, Ms. Spire, and thank you again for this opportunity. Yes, this is going to be a very, very interesting year. And I think everyone knows the pandemic has brought out a lot of issues that we're going to have to we've been dealing with them, and we're going to have to really dig in and come up with some remedies, particularly in education. We know for a fact that there have always been inequities in education. That has always been an issue. And I think this pandemic has brought that out even more so. We saw how many thousands of children did not have access to a laptop or to connect to the internet so that they can start classes. Many of them went weeks, if not months, without an education. So the achievement gap just got worse. And we're going to have to really, really focus on that and how we're going to, in the near future, not see these problems. We had communities that were able to connect and have their kids in school through virtual learning within the next day. And then we had others that, like I said, took months. Some really big issues that we're going to have to deal with. The other thing is minority teacher recruitment. It's something that we've been talking about for years. I still don't see a good solid increase in that area, and it's concerning. And there is a residence program that we like to really look at that CREC is doing. We're hoping that we can fund that moving forward. So there's going to be a lot of discussion in regards to funding education. There's going to be discussion in regards to certification of teachers. Another area that is dear to my heart is early childhood. We've seen over 60 local, well, not local, but statewide private and public daycares close their doors because of the pandemic. So that means you have hundreds, if not thousands of now preschoolers that don't have preschool. So we're going to really have to sit down with Commissioner Beth Bai and come up with a plan. And she is working on a plan as we speak. And she will be bringing that plan out soon to help the daycares and the preschool programs throughout the state. The other issue that I've always argued was equal pay for preschool teachers. That's another area that we really need to focus on. We've lost not only teachers in the public school system because of the pandemic, but we have many preschool teachers that even dropped out of college to get their early childhood degrees and have moved into other professions because early childhood preschool teachers don't pay what they should be paying, particularly for nonprofit organizations such as the Human Resource Agency here in New Britain. And, they have over close to 500 children that they service. And many of the teachers in that program, we put mandates, told them that they have to get their bachelor's degrees, and then we don't pay them. And so there's concerns there too. And there's a whole bunch of other concerns, but I'm looking forward to the rest of this meeting and the questions. Thank you.
Bobby, could you fill us in on your committees? I imagine you're still on education. Are you
Yes.
still there?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm the chair of the Education Committee again. I'm serving my 6th term. And I am also on the Finance Committee and on the Housing Committee. And I'm very happy to have Representative Pettit, Senator Lopes, and Representative Sanchez, Manny Sanchez, on the Education Committee with me. We're gonna be talking a lot about education in the coming weeks and months.
It does sound like a lot of area of intersectionality. Good, thank you. And let's hear from Representative Peter Terziak, please.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Ann, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this and for everything else you do to keep folks informed. I've kept the same committees and subcommittees, going to still be on approps, still chairing the Legislative Management Subcommittee of Appropriations, staying on public health, and staying on energy and technology. And that's what I wanted to do. Titles, I'm still an assistant deputy speaker. So if you spend all your time watching us in session in a normal year, that would mean you'd see me on the dais with the gavel a couple of times. What I'm going to be focusing on is the usual, more money for New Britain. We've never gotten enough. Our students need more. Our residents need more. There are projects all over the city that will do better if we can get more state money in there. We're working on it. Still paying attention to healthcare access. We've seen some real disparities getting worse. And some of the plans we we're looking at would be expanding healthcare access, having a public option for insurance, expanding Husky, which is Medicaid, from the 160-ish% of the poverty level to about 210 of the poverty level. And overall, paying attention to who pays for the COVID recovery. When talking about money, it's important to remember our budget is in balance. We do not have a deficit. We have zombie budget complaints that just won't die and go away. Our budget is in the black. We are running 5% ahead of what we thought we would be. We're doing fine. If we change nothing changes. We've got the money to keep on doing what we're doing at least at the amount we're doing it. It's important to not be running around screaming that we have to cut, that the budget's not in balance. That may have been true in some years. It is demonstrably and just plain not true now. So I'll be fighting that disinformation all I can too. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Well, that brings us some information on who our panelists are and what their various committees will be for the next year. Let me start off with the questions, asking a question which the League of Women Voters is extremely interested in seeing move forward this year. And it affects the absentee ballot voting, essentially. First question is, do you support an amendment to Article 6 of the state constitution to permit an elector to cast a ballot at a designated location prior to the day of an election? And paired with that is, do you support an amendment to the same article of the Constitution to allow a qualified elector to, regardless of reason, cast an absentee ballot instead of appearing at a polling place the day of election? So if we could have some opinions on that, that would be very helpful to the League, which is extremely interested in seeing this happen during the next year. Do I have somebody volunteering to start off? In which case, just start talking and the picture will grab you, or else I'll pick one of you.
If somebody else doesn't start talking, I will.
Go, Peter.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm in favor of everything that the League wants to do about ballot access and have been. People have watched this past election, and I can't count how many folks have said, why don't we have an early voting period? How come in that Republican state they're able to vote with no absentee, with no excuse absentee ballots? Most of the country is doing what the League would like to see Connecticut start doing. And it's about time. We've got to make sure that we don't fall for the hysteria about there is something wrong and dishonest about absentee voting. We know where that line is coming from and what it's really about. So yes, I'm committed to fighting for increased ballot access and doing everything I can to help make that happen. By the way, things that aren't on the League's agenda that I could be favoring, I wouldn't mind seeing 16-year-olds vote in some elections. We could possibly authorize it for local elections. Much of Europe does that without falling apart. And there are other changes like that. Well, the right to order voting people, that you don't just vote for one person. You say, this is my favorite, this is my second favorite, this is my third. And we end up in the end with the person that's most agreeable to the most people. State of Maine started doing it. They haven't fallen apart, but they might. I understand. Just because much of the world does it this way doesn't mean that we can. But I think we can. And I'm supporting those measures too. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can I pass the question to someone else? And if not, I'll ask one of you. Okay, Senator Martin, would you like to talk as a Senate view on this?
Sure. I would entertain the early voting to some degree. What I think voter identification is important in voting. I'm not in favor of the Secretary of State sending out an absentee ballot to all voters. I think there's a lot of complications, and the register of voters or the clerks were overwhelmed, and it's added additional burden to them. But I think introducing COVID as an excuse going forward as an allowable excuse, I think yes, I think that's important. But I think the voter has a responsibility of requesting the ballot and not necessarily it being sent to them. I think part of I guess we've done, or what people are doing, they're expecting things to just come to them. I'm a firm believer in you got to take the initiative in a lot of things in your life, and I think this is one of them.
Okay, thank you. Do I have someone else who would like to chime in at this point?
I could get behind the no excuse absentee balloting. I think we're almost there. Many of my constituents have asked for it. I would agree that, I have parents that are in their 80s, so whether they call and request the ballot and it gets mailed here, or if they have the chance to stop at the municipal center, you can request it and fill it out right then and there. If we could, have that available within 30 or 4 to 6 weeks before the election, I think that's a reasonable approach to help people that are a little less mobile, or people who are not sure whether they're going to be here. So that's something that I could support.
Okay, could I at least have some brief statements from the rest of you as to whether you do or do not support no excuse need be given absentee balloting?
Yes. Hi, Ann. I support the voter, what do you call it? The League of Women Voters initiative. I support early voting as well. I agree with Representative Terziak that there are so many states out there, which we call red and blue states, that have been doing this for a long time, and there haven't been really big issues. I also have gotten calls from constituents in regards to absentee ballots going out earlier, and for no excuse absentee ballots moving forward. And I look forward to voting yes if this bill comes out this year, because I think it wasn't overwhelming to our clerk or our city. They had printed out, I think, like 25,000 ballots for absentee ballots, and they only had a request of about 8,000 to 10,000. So it wasn't really overwhelming for them, and they were able to get the numbers out immediately. So I think it's a good system, and I think we need to continue with it.
Okay, thank you. Senator Lopes?
Sure. I think the one thing we can, boy, this thing keeps changing on me. The one thing we can take into consideration here is how well it went. We're going to speak about Connecticut. It's absolutely amazing that this was the first time we ever had virtually no excuse absentee ballots. We sent the ballots to every single person, every voter in the state. And this is the very first time it's ever happened, a trial run during a pandemic when people couldn't really work in person that well. And it ran pretty well. It was smooth. It's only going to get better year after year. I mean, in a normal year where people can actually go to the office, the clerks and the registrars can go to the office and actually work, it's only going to get better. So, I mean, kudos go to all the registrars, the Secretary of State's office, the clerks. I mean, what an amazing job that, hiccups here and there always happen. But for the most part, it ran pretty smooth. And I think the people of the state, the voters of the state, were very happy with it. And I obviously support all these initiatives to get more people to vote. The more people that vote, the better. I would like to even go further and stop trying to make people have to register and just have, if you're a citizen of this state, you're registered. You can vote. There's no reason why we can't do that. It would be lovely to get this state upwards of where other countries are that vote at 80-90%, as opposed to only having half the members of this state pick who the elected officials are. So yeah, anything we can do to encourage more voters is, I think, very important for our state, our city, our country. It's definitely the right move forward to get as many voices heard as possible.
Hey, thank you. Well, let's move on to our co-hosts and let you talk a little bit and I'll talk less. Mariola, may I ask you if you would like to ask your first question?
Yes. This is again a state league priority, but it's also one that's very important for urban school systems. Public schools throughout Connecticut offer very different levels of opportunity and success for their students. What proposals would you support to create equity of educational opportunity for all students in the state?
I think that it would be appropriate to hand the microphone virtually to Mr. Robert Sanchez.
Yes, I've had numerous discussions with CAPS, which is administrators across the state of Connecticut. And what we've been talking about is a model curriculum that would go out, that everyone at the state of Connecticut would use. All the school systems would use this model curriculum. The issue at hand with the model curriculum is that it's going to be very costly. And so we really need to see how we could get the funding for this model curriculum, because we're not just talking about developing it, we're talking about getting the equipment and the books and everything else that needs to go with it to the public school systems. And we know that there's some big issues in this state in regards to equity, and you know, we did pass a couple of years ago the Black and Puerto Rican Studies history studies bill, which is going to kick in this coming year for only high school students. And that's another curriculum where we want to expand from preschool to high school. And that seems to be an issue here in our state too, that we have certain curriculums that should be expanded from the preschool level all the way up to the high school level. The other one is financial literacy, which is very important for our kids to know how to save, save in case there's an emergency down the road. So there's so much that we're going to be talking about this year. It's going to be a very difficult year because of the pandemic, and we're doing everything through Zoom. But absolutely, we really need to look into, I think, a model curriculum that every child in the state of Connecticut and every that gets that model curriculum in their hands, and it's going to take all local board of eds to be part of it.
That's what I was going to ask you as a short follow-up. Is this mandated by the state that boards of ed are to include this in their curriculum, or is it voluntary with a carrot of a great deal of funding and resources?
Presently, everything that's put out and put forward is not really a mandate. It's basically a curriculum, like in regards to the Black and Puerto Rican history. It's going to be there, and we're going to see how many school systems will embrace it. Eventually, if we don't see that many school systems are embracing it, we might move towards a mandate. But again, I like to see it be a mandate, but we also have to look at what the cost will be, because we're talking about also training the teachers. We have to put money, funding aside to train the teachers so that they can teach this curriculum. And so with the model curriculum, I would love to see, and many of these administrators would love to see it to be a mandate moving forward. But again, it's going to be a very costly curriculum to develop.
When I was thinking about equity, it had more to do with equal funding for school systems throughout the state. And I think that this the fact that property taxes fund school systems really makes for certain school systems having more per pupil money to use. And so what do you think in terms of funding for schools?
Of course, we worked on an ECS formula some 3 years ago, and we're going to be talking about ECS again because of the inequities we saw this year with the pandemic. Yes, definitely. I mean, New Britain is one city that within the next 10 years is going to get a little more in state funding through the ECS formula. Last year and the year before, it received $4 million. And if we continue the schedule moving forward, that's what New Britain will get, up to an extra $35 to $40 million by the time the 10-year period is up. But that being said, on the city side, many of these municipalities that do better is because many municipalities put in their own funding. Unfortunately, in New Britain, we haven't done that as much, and it has to do a lot with the property taxes being high as well, like the cities of Hartford and Bridgeport, which many of these cities can't afford to put too much into educational funding. But we're going to have to look at that formula moving forward to make it equitable throughout the state of Connecticut. So that's going to be talked about, and I think that's going to be one of our controversial bills that may come out of our committee, and that would be the education cost sharing formula. And we're also talking about special education here, and we're also talking about transportation. So there's a lot of other components to this, and we're talking about quite a bit of money and funds for this. And CAPS came out with this really nice plan that they're going to present to us. And with their plan, it calls for an extra $78 million in ECS funding this year alone, and then next year push that up to 153 million. So as you see, a lot more funding is going to be needed if we're going to do it at the state level. So those talks will be moving forward. I can't tell you how much of funding we'll get, but we will be pushing for more funding and more equity in regards to education cost sharing.
Okay, thank you. May I have somebody else chime in on this? I would think you all have opinions.
I have a couple of quick comments. I would agree with Representative Sanchez that the ECS formula as it stands now is an improvement from past formulas. And as long as there's not deleterious tinkering to it, it'll help to benefit the schools that it's supposed to benefit, those that are suffering the most. And Representative Sanchez mentioned briefly that special education, the extra payments, that's going to have to increase. And so that is something that'll go from education to appropriations and finance to see where we stand in terms of budgeting and payment. And finally, the thing Representative Sanchez and I discussed briefly before we went live is the program that's going on in New Britain's involved to try to recruit more diverse teachers. I think it's a long fix, but we need more Black and more Latino teachers in the system to serve as role models and mentors for the kids. And I think that's going to be as important, if not more important than the money, if the kids can see role models that help them go forward, stay in school, graduate, and become successful. So I'm hopeful that program will be successful and won't be so costly that other towns shy away from it.
Thank you. Who's next on this one? Education impacts so many families in our city.
I'll take a crack at it.
Thanks, Rick.
So, Connecticut, as we like to say, has a dirty little secret. We're one of the wealthiest states in this country. And yet, more than all our neighboring states, it's clear that we're broken down into wealthy communities and poor communities, and we're more segregated than almost all our neighboring states, if not all the states in the country. So I've said this for years. if your kids grow up in Connecticut, they're virtually guaranteed a world-class education with world-class healthcare and top-of-the-line economic opportunities. But that is except unless your kids are growing up in one of the 10 poor communities in Connecticut. And then they don't have access to that. So while we do a great job in our wealthy towns, and don't forget, you grow up in Connecticut, you're going to do okay. You're going to be educated properly, good health care, good opportunities, unless, again, you grow up in a poor community. And then you just don't get that benefit. And we're talking about the difference of like a quarter of a mile over a border to make that much of a difference in a kid's life and the future of a town and the future of the person's career. It's just not right. We have a level of segregation that is not acceptable. And for years, we've all known that if we followed the old ECS formula correctly without all its adjustments, New Britain would already be getting that $35 million more than it gets currently. And what they said, oh, that's crazy. That means New Britain would be getting, cities would be getting unbelievable amounts of money, and some of these rich towns would be getting almost nothing. Well, yeah, that's what needs to happen. Because the reality is, those towns don't need all that extra state money to provide a high level of education. And New Britain needs more because it's not just the money, it's the impediments that the kids face growing up. You know, having to grow up in a poor household, families that don't speak English as a first language, various special needs that come up that are tied to poverty and economic problems. So we really have to work on this. It's the education is a big part, but it's still just a part of the greater whole. That in this state, our dirty little secret is we have rich towns and poor towns. We have zoning, we have economic policies, we have all sorts of things in place to make this the land of steady habits to continue this problem, continue this segregation. And I think we're going to see over the next 10 years, we have to address this if we want to make a state that is completely a solid, positive state to grow up in. We can't have this rich town, poor town mentality and the problems that come from it. It's just going to end up with our cities, most of our cities are our poor towns, being these economic wastelands that can't survive and can't produce. And you know, we have poor education outcomes and the highest taxes. How's that okay? It doesn't make sense. Whereas towns have great education and low property taxes. Those are unfair burdens that people who live in the cities have to face, and we need to address these over the next couple of years. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on education funding, equity?
And there have been several questions, or two questions anyway, that have come in. One through our New Britain League email, and one in the Q&A. So I'm wondering if this would be a good time to mention those.
Choose one of them.
Okay. Through the Q&A from John McNamara, will there be a serious proposal to make state income taxes more progressive to ease the pressure on property taxes?
Okay. Anyone were jumping in to answer it, or shall I pick someone?
I responded in the chat to say that I certainly had heard proposals through the media, but have not seen anything directly in terms of a bill proposal. We still have another week to submit bills. The governor has stated that he does not want to raise taxes. I don't know if that means changing tax rates. So someone who's on finance may have more insight if they've had a meeting yet to see whether those proposals have yet made it to that committee. But I've only seen some proposals that have been read about them in the newspaper and online.
Okay, thank you. Peter, do you have anything to say? As we didn't hear from you last time, let's bring you in.
Thank you very much. Yes, there is going to be a serious proposal about raising tax rates on the people who have had their federal taxes lowered. There is a lot of room between what people were paying and what people are paying now with the big cuts that went to the wealthiest and that went to the larger corporations, not the smaller businesses. If some of us look at that and say, there's an opportunity. The folks who have been saying, oh, we'd like to do more, but we can't afford it. Now you can do more, and it's no less affordable than your taxes were last year. The question is, who's getting it? And if we want to keep people's taxes even at the top end, there's a lot of money that can be collected and from the wealthiest for the state of Connecticut that they would, under normal circumstances, prior to tax cuts, have been paying to the federal government. So some of us look at that and say it's a wash in the person's pocket, but it's all the difference in the world when it comes to our communities in Connecticut. So there will be a serious proposal about that. There's at least one group together working on it. How will it be received? That we have to see. Period. We'll see.
Follow up on that. Is there some way that you could define what wealthy means, or is it too early to even ask the question of you?
I think that a lot of people are comfortable with what Joe Biden was saying he'd like to see happen. It's surprising how many people make more than $400,000 and got serious tax cuts. It's funny because in Connecticut, when we talk about wealthy and middle class, much of our middle class in other states would count as the wealthy. But we're an expensive place to live. I'm not saying that we should be changing how we view whether somebody's wealthy or middle class, but that distinction has already been made by the federal government in terms of who gets taxed and who gets tax cuts. And I'm content to keep on with that definition. So the folks who are earning $250,000 a year don't have to worry about things changing. The folks who are earning $400,000 and more a year have to worry that the money after the first $400,000 earned will end up being taxed at a total tax rate that is no higher than it used to be. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. That gives us a little more detail on what your thinking is. Anyone else want to chime in on taxes?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up some comments. This pandemic exposed some really strange stuff in the economy, in Connecticut especially. And it's becoming more and more evident by our tax receipts coming in from tax, that affect our budget, that the middle class was a mixed bag on this pandemic in this last year. Some did okay, some did as good as last year, some did worse, but it was kind of all over the place. The working class, the hourly workers on a whole, tended to do worse. They took this pandemic on the chin. A lot of them lost hours, lost work, lost jobs, struggling with unemployment insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But our wealthy are extremely wealthy, even going much higher than what Peter was talking about. I'm talking people make over $1 million a year, people make over $5 million a year. These people had the best year in the last 50 years. It was an absolute bonanza. And then due to the weird complications of how the pandemic hit New York first or whatever, we have a lot of wealthy people moving into Connecticut because Connecticut financially is in better shape than most other states. And then frankly, we have a higher standard of living than most other states. So we saw an influx of people of higher incomes. It's pretty obvious when you see the three strata of the residents of this state, the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy. The wealthy did exceptionally well. The rest didn't. And some of us are really pushing for proposals that do ask these ultra wealthy to pay more. They have the capacity to pay more, and they can pay more, as Peter said, not even on their first $400,000, just pay maybe more on the money they make after that. The middle class, I think, in this proposal should deserve some sort of tax break, something that helps them, credit or something along the lines that acknowledges that over the last 50 years, they've picked up more and more of the tax burden in this country. And then the working class and the people who are really devastated need to be the focus of most of the relief money coming from the federal government, because they took it, this pandemic affected them the worst, and they deserve the most relief money to help them along. So that's how a lot of us have been looking at this. I do know there's one or two proposals that I've seen so far addressing parts of this, and there's a more comprehensive proposal that includes a lot of the pieces that is probably going to be submitted next week.
Okay, thank you. So far, we've heard from our Democrats on the tax issue. May I hear from either Dr. Pettit or Senator Martin?
So it would make sense to, from what we're hearing here, that we should be taxing maybe the corporations who are very profitable, or the more affluent, more wealthy individuals in our state. But here's the rub, and we've experienced this in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly. The amount of individuals that have left our state because of a lot of people have become very cynical that we can't fix Connecticut, and those that are many have decided to leave our state, and unfortunately it is those who are earning a greater income than those that are moving into our state of Connecticut, and that's reality. But the consequences of those individuals leaving, and I remember being on the floor a couple of years ago, and it was Senator Scott Bronson stood up and made a comment regarding the top 100 wage earners that were paying the highest portion of taxes here in the state of Connecticut, and those individuals from year to year, the top individuals, or those top 100, there's a change in them, and those that moved out were replaced by those on a lower spectrum or that list, and moved up. And the net result was we lost, and don't hold me to this, I just don't remember the number, but it was like $300 million. So now as a state, and being, trying to balance the budget, now we have to go find this gap that was left because of those individuals that left the state. So that's the rub that you, as legislators, and that we have to deal with on the state. Is okay, yeah, it seems to make sense to, if we did this and we raised the rate from X to to another, to X or to Y, then we would get this net result. But the reality in what we've seen is that we actually lose some funding. So
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to talk about income taxes? Briefly, anyone have anything to say about what you see as being the sales tax, and any changes or additions or subtractions from the sales tax?
No, I just wanted to chime in on the income tax. I agree with my colleagues that we really need to look at those incomes that are $400,000 or over. I believe that the Biden administration has their own plan, and I think that's something that we need to look at here in the state of Connecticut. People that, it was Representative, I think, Terziak, who said that some people have made very well during this pandemic, and they are the people that have the money. They made extremely well. I have one of the poorest districts that I represent here, and I can tell you families that are so afraid of being homeless after February 9th. We have to do something. We have to do something to help these families. And many of them are still lining up for food at food pantries. The poor got hit very, very hard during this pandemic, more so than anyone else. And the working poor, especially, and I know so many people that don't have jobs still and want to work. They want to work, but don't have the jobs and are doing poorly. So yes, if that proposal did come up, I would probably be a yes vote.
Okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Why don't we switch subjects? And Mariola, can you bring us another question, please?
Yes, this is a league question again. Do you support the Police Accountability Act as it now stands? If not, what changes do you support?
It's supported as it now stands. I'm not in favor of any changes.
I do support the way it stands. There was just a report, I think, maybe the other day or yesterday. I think it came out of CT, the Connecticut News Junkie, where they talked about qualified immunity. And, there was talk about qualified immunity costing municipalities and police officers lots and lots of dollars if they were sued. And this report that came out basically said that it would not cost the municipalities. As far as they're concerned, it wouldn't cost them. So I think that's something that that our community has been asking about. I've said to people, for the most part, our police department here in New Britain has done a wonderful job, right? But there are some individuals that are, let's call it as it is, bad apples. And they need to be held accountable. And I think this bill goes a long way to hold these individuals accountable. If you're doing a good job, hey, great. You stay on, you get paid. But if you're not, then it's time to go.
Thank you. Anyone else on the Police Accountability Act?
Well,
Gene?
perhaps related, probably one of the more common emails I received through the last couple weeks of December, independent of pandemic and vaccine issues, was vehicle theft, recurrent property theft. I've spoken with the chiefs in both the districts, and they're concerned about the repeat offenders, 17-year-old juveniles. They're looking for some changes, and perhaps it's not directly police accountability, but looking for changes so that people that are repeat offenders can be remanded to an adult court, because they feel like, and it's many towns, it's not just the 22nd district. It's heard it from many of my colleagues in central Connecticut, that the police are picking up the same offenders over and over and over again. And
I'd just like to point.
I agree with Representative Sanchez that they're probably too soon to know whether or not the qualified immunity, whether there's any impact. I mean, the bill was just passed, so there's not a lot of data. The analysis is that there won't be any impact, and it may be so. And I think that's sort of where Senator Winfield is on the issue, that it may take more time to see what the overall impact is.
Thank you. Peter, were you wanting to say something?
I'll go in, Peter, if you're all right.
Yeah, thank you.
So Representative Pettit there seemed a little bit confused. You got to be very clear to people. This will be my public service announcement. The police accountability has absolutely nothing to do with this rash of car thefts that's going on in June.
That wasn't my implication. It came out related tangentially.
Yeah, it came out that way, Bill. So I just want to be very clear to people. And I just the police accountability as it stands, I think most of us are going to let it fly as it is. Let's see how it rolls out this year. It looks like it's working so far. More and more police chiefs are in support of it. Every single officer I've talked to has nitpicky problems with portions of it, but for the most part, most of them have been agreeing that it's moving in the right direction, and it should help with accountability down the road. But I do want to speak to this car theft and juvenile issue, because it's become a little bit of a hot topic. There is no question that it is a problem. In some of the surrounding towns, Fairland, Quainton, Farmington even, we're looking at 200% and 300% increase in car thefts, mostly involving juveniles. And a lot of misinformation has been coming out. The mayor of Newington passed forward information that was absolutely incorrect about this. And we want to cut it off at the bud. This is going to be the public service announcement. There was no change in law that created it and made it more easy for juveniles to steal cars and not be accountable for it. No, there's been no change in the law for over 8 years on this. The increase in car thefts is not just a town problem. It's not a state problem. It's a national problem at this time. And after a couple forums I've been involved with state prosecutors, with police and everything, this is the public service announcement part of this. The driving force in these car theft increases are the modernization of cars and the keyless car fobs that people carry in their use to start cars. People are leaving these fobs inside the cars, and you have juveniles who, there's been no change in the law again, I'll say, but juveniles who are bored because of the pandemic, they're not in school, they have free time, they're walking around, they check a car door, they open it up, if it's unlocked, they sit down, they hit the start button, and if the fob is in the car, or if the fob is even close to the car in the house, there are a lot of cars that don't start, and they drive the car away. It's cheaper than Uber. And then they go about their business, and the cars are recovered later and later. Changing the law to make these kids be tried as adults won't change anything. They're saying for every 300 kids that steal a car, they're only catching around 5. So how would the change in law in charging those 5 kids as adults stop this rash of car thefts? They're not catching the kids. The kids drive the cars, get out, and go about their business, and the cops are recovering cars, 15 a night in certain towns, and usually undamaged, and they just bring them back home. If the person keeps the fob and the cup holder again, the car's stolen the next night too. So people need to own the responsibility of, I hate to blame the victim when someone having their car stolen, but lock your cars, don't leave the fobs in the cars, and we definitely do need to address and put funding into helping juveniles do so they stop going around stealing cars during the pandemic. But in a nutshell, I've done a lot of work on this. Some of the towns I've dealt with, Newington and Berlin, are really going through a huge amount of a large increase in the numbers of car thefts, and it's something that has to be addressed. But have to understand, it has nothing to do with any laws that we passed, any legislation we put forward. It's really a national problem. It's a cross between technology changing and the pandemic causing these kids to have more free time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mary, let's come up with another question, please.
Okay, this came through on through my email from an email address. The person has not identified himself or herself.
Fine.
And it's the first part of the question is directed to Senator Martin. We have Connecticut lottery programs, Lucky for Life, Lotto, Powerball, etc. Do you support expanding on legalized gambling in the state of Connecticut? Why or why not?
Okay, of course, this can go out to anyone.
Sure.
Senator Martin, do you want to take the first answer to it, though?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I think if the horse wasn't already out of the barn, I think I would probably be not in favor of it. I just think it's just, those that tend to, spend money on lottery, just, I don't think it's a healthy habit for them. But since the horse is out of the barn, do I in favor of expanding the program? I think I'm in favor of the sports online betting. I think that's an avenue that we should probably explore. And unless there's something other specific other than expanding lottery, I don't know what that gets us. I think if you took a survey and found who spends money on lottery versus those that don't, and look at their age and look at their income levels, we might find some a class of individuals, lack of a better word here, a term here, that are spending money in that area that really can't afford it in hopes of gaining, the eat some easy money. But the horse is already out of the barn. If
Okay,
regarding sports online betting, I think I'd be open to that.
okay, thank you. Any other comments on this?
In the spirit of true bipartisanship, I completely agree with Senator Martin on this. I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of more gambling, but he is right. The state's moving in that direction. Just this morning, my wife and I arguing about her yet again buying another lotto ticket and spending $1 yesterday, and we did not win the $400 million. So more wasted money out of our household. And she maintains that she's going to win someday, so she's going to keep playing. But yeah, I agree with him completely on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Mariola, do you have another question for us, please? I'm sure you do.
Okay, do you support the clean slate legislation proposed to give convicted criminals a clean slate after completion of their sentence and a clean record for a specific period of years after the completion? This legislation would cause erasure of records for those who have been convicted after completion of their sentences and a time period to ensure no further law-related problems. For those guilty of misdemeanors, the record will erase 7 years after their sentence is completed. For felonies, 10 or 12 years, depending on the original crime. With no problems, the record will erase itself. Certain categories of criminals will not qualify for clean slate, such as child predators. What do you think about this legislation?
Okay, do I have someone who? Go ahead, please. Good.
Yes, I support that. I worked for so many years in a fatherhood initiative program here in the city of New Britain, and majority of the dads that not all of them, but a majority that come into the program have had misdemeanors and felonies, served time, and the most difficult problem we have in this state is that when these individuals come out of incarceration, women or female or male, they can't get housing, they can't get jobs. It's very difficult for many of them, and those that do get them are very lucky. And I know a few that have been able to, as soon as getting out of incarceration, have found a job or have been able to get some type of apartment and support themselves. But there's a majority of them that cannot and still cannot. It always comes up, and it's wrong because they paid their price. If they have a clean record after the fact, and like I said, I know a majority of these individuals that have done a fabulous job. They're raising families. Some of them have jobs. Some of them have their own homes, and they're doing great. And they still have that felony, and they have to go through a process with the Pardons and Parole Board, which at times may listen to to these individuals 2 or 3 times before they make a solid decision of yes or no to pardon them. And then there's also a cost to that. So I definitely am supportive.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have some ideas about clean slate?
Well, I just think that, like with many of these bills, the devil's in the details. I don't have a big issue with the misdemeanor crimes. I may have some significant issues with crimes of violence, especially sexual violence and the child issues. And I agree, even people who've committed those crimes may reform, but you should allow the future employers and other people to make that decision so that I can sit down with someone in an interview face to face and hear the story and make the decision with all the information, as opposed to being the information somehow erased, part of someone's life like it never happened. So the details are critical. I'd be hard pressed to support erasing crimes of violence, certain felonies.
Okay, thank you. Representative Terziak, are you? No, it looks like you were not interested in jumping in here. Okay, thank you.
I'll just throw in just some similar comments to Representative Pettit. I think definitely we have to see the data and what's in the bill exactly. I think I'd like to see if, what the numbers are regarding, we've had, I'll say 100 who have misdemeanors, and here's if it's 2 or 3 years, that benchmark that we would expunge their records after that. I'd be curious to see what the data is. Gee, this is how many who have been through the process, been incarcerated, regardless if it's a misdemeanor or felony. Let's see the numbers and how many have returned or have been rearrested, so to speak, and those that have been very good. I can totally understand what Representative Sanchez comments about the lack of housing or their ability to get housing and jobs as well. So, but I think it would be important to see what the details are of the bill, along with the data that shows that, hey, listen, this is what actually, there's a good percentage of individuals who have paid their dues and who are now good citizens, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mary, why don't we move on to another subject? Mary O'Brien, do you have another question for us, please?
I have one more that I received through email, and this person is saying, I'm wondering if you are satisfied with the fast track Connecticut transit bus system. I see so many buses going by my home day after day with no one on them. Can someone comment about that?
Okay, we have someone who's on transportation. Want to start off with that?
Go ahead, Rick, if you want to.
Sure, but I have to forewarn you, I'm going to steal one of Peter's lines for this. I don't want to be glib with this person, but the reality is we don't have public transportation in this state. We've gone through 50 years of building shopping centers across the street from each other that you can't walk from one to the other. You have to drive from one to the other. We've had some backwards thinking. You'd be naive to think that we don't need to move in the direction of more public transportation for so many reasons. We can't afford our highways and bridges, and yet we just push everyone into a car to drive everywhere. For people at lower income levels, public transportation is very important. But I'm going to steal Peter's line on this one too. I want to ask this person: are they upset at 2 o'clock in the morning when no one's driving on the highway? Because we pay for the highway as well, and there's times that people don't use that. And it's the same thing with all types of public transportation. There are times the busway is absolutely packed. We have had to add buses and early in the morning, 5, 6 a.m., because there's been too many people getting on it, and there was not enough room on some of these buses. And then at certain points, you're right, during the middle of the day, there are times when the buses run empty. And without question, I think the pandemic has affected the amount of people using public transportation. It was doing far better than before the pandemic, but we can't just stop it for a year or two until the virus gets under control. So I assume people will be going back to using them if they were using them before. Just so people know, the busway did hit its ridership numbers that the DOT expected. In fact, in some cases, it exceeded them. So it's performing as it's meant to perform, and it's helping a lot of people get to work and back. I think one of the gentlemen who put a question in earlier is someone who uses it almost every commute from New Britain to Hartford and back. So it does work.
Any other comments on transportation, whether it's the busway or our rail system or the future of Bradley Airport, connections of the airport to the trains? Any other comments?
Sure, I'll jump in since I was ranking on that committee. And I've been a member on it since I joined the legislature for four terms. So listen, I don't think the busway is meant for all municipalities or a regional type of approach. I think I'm a believer in the intracity, and I think if Hartford needs a bus system to move their people around, I think absolutely. I think that probably holds true for New Britain as well. But I see, and I'll tell you the feedback that I get from my constituents here in Bristol. I think what I hear is that we're the state of Connecticut, people are laughing at regarding this busway idea because the buses are empty. I have personally seen 3 buses in tangent on North Main Street in Bristol, and they're completely empty. I had come home from a session at a late hour, and I saw a fast track bus in front of me, completely empty. We are losing over 20 million. I think the last number I heard, 20 to 25 million dollars annually on this idea. So I think it's something that we need to look at. We are going to need to address our budget. I beg to differ regarding the budget that currently we're flush. The consensus revenue that came in this year, or yesterday in particular, right, shows that we have a 70 million surplus, and that's a far cry from a month ago, or excuse me, November, where it was like $850 million deficit. Far cry, and there's a lot that came in within a 2-month period or a month period, and the numbers, I think, are not reflective of the fact that we've had income that came in from the federal government that helped us achieve those numbers. And the dust has not settled yet completely regarding COVID. So if you take those funds coming into the state of Connecticut and the drop in revenue that the state would have received through various state income tax, we would have been in the same situation or maybe even worse. But with that said, the out years, we went from a 2.4 deficit in the next biennium year, and with the consensus revenue that we received yesterday, it shows now like a 2.2 or 2.6 billion dollar deficit. So it's quite different. Nonetheless, there is still the deficit. It's ahead of us. So it's important that if we are losing money in any of our services that we are providing, such as the busway, and there's $20 million or 25 or 30, whatever it may be, then I think we have to take a hard look whether or not that is a successful program or not. Thank you.
Should we stop plowing the roads at night because nobody's driving on them?
No, I'm not
And
saying
if we
that.
do plow the roads
I'm
at
not
night,
saying that.
and if we do plow the roads at night, should we count that as money that was wasted and an expense we didn't need?
I want to just quickly in here, just to clarify one of Senator Martin's comments. Yes, the busway loses money every year. People have to bear in mind every single piece of public transportation loses money because it's public transportation. The highways lose much more every year than the busway does. Shoreline East, the rail system, loses hundreds of millions of dollars a year, even charging people to use it. That's the point of public transportation. The public all puts money in together to help people get transfer from one place to another. So everyone driving a car uses the ability of highways and roads for public transportation. Every piece of public transportation loses money. And so to say the busway is losing money, it's a failed system, doesn't make sense. Every bit of public transportation loses money. And I go further, but that's about it.
Hey, folks, I've just looked at my watch and noticed that it is 5 of 12. And as much as I like hearing from you and could do it for a long time, we did promise to let you out of here on time as well. If we've got about 5 minutes left, is there 1 minute worth of wisdom that you'd each like to share with us before we say good evening for the day? So let's see, we ran the, well, Rick, you're on the screen. So would you like to start your 1 minute?
I'll actually start by reading the headline in the Current today and pulling off what Senator Martin was just saying. The headline reads, Connecticut officials forecast budget surplus of $70 million this year after earlier predictions of $2 billion deficit. So there are a couple things going for us in this state right now. We had a rainy day fund of over $3 billion. And then the economy is not performing as badly as we thought. We are actually among the top 5 best states economically prepared and best able to handle this last pandemic. And that bodes well for the future of this state. Things were done correctly over the last couple of years. The fact that our projected future budgets still show potential deficit, well, that's weird because that's just, they're guessing for the future. Those projected deficits have already shrunk by half, which means if the economy keeps producing at the rate it's doing, we're at a growth rate of 5%. Our normal growth rate is around 2.5%. If we continue at that rate, those projected deficits will also continue to shrink. I think a lot of credit goes to the people who crafted our last couple of budgets, and I think we might have a good year ahead of us as long as the pandemic gets under control. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Martin, may we hear your 1 minute closer?
I'll just close with my opening comments regarding the importance of identifying those that are going to be majorly affected by this COVID pandemic, those businesses, individuals, and doing our best to help them get back on their feet so that we can have a rebounding recovery here in the state of Connecticut. So thank you for the invite. It was very informative on my end to learn a little bit more about my colleagues. And thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining in. Senator Representative Bill Pettit. I'm getting back to my paper to see where I'm at.
Thank you, and thank you to the league. I guess I would just leave people with sort of public service. We really didn't touch on the vaccines and the like. I just urge people to try to be patient. The 1B group has expanded to over 1.5 million people. We may have about 100,000 vaccines on hand right now, maybe getting a supply of 45 to 50,000 vaccines per week. It's going to take a long time to roll out and catch up. Right now, we have the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. When the Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca vaccines become available and our supply increases probably end of February and March, hopefully we'll be flush with vaccine and anybody who wants to get it will be able to do it. But it's a big logistical issue to try to vaccinate 3 million people. So right now, the people over 75 can get in line. In New Britain, people are going to be able to go through the hospital of Central Connecticut, and other places are being set up. But you're going to have to be patient. It's a big undertaking. But hopefully over the next 4 to 6 months, we'll get there and be in good shape.
I hope so. Okay, may we hear from Representative Bobby Sanchez?
Yes, thank you. So what I like to share is that New Britain and Connecticut, we have seen the inequities in education and housing and healthcare, particularly going into education, because I am chair of the education committee. I want to be focusing on how we can make things more equitable in the state of Connecticut. And I've heard from many of my colleagues and I've heard from many people saying that something needs to be done. So I am hopeful that we will get some really good legislation through this year that is going to be helpful for all of us. I want to make sure that all our kids have a quality education in the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. And Representative Peter Terziak.
Thank you very much. In addition to the things other people have mentioned, I'd like to get back to one thing that's central to everything we do, and that's about voter rights and the reminder that voting is a right. there are no actions required to be eligible to vote in the Constitution. Be a citizen and you can vote. It doesn't require ID. It does. The arguments we hear about we shouldn't have voting in other sites are exactly the same arguments that were heard when it was first suggested that voting didn't all have to be done at City Hall. And we should be careful about this and remember what's going on and do everything we can to preserve people's right to vote and to encourage them to be informed and to come out and vote. Thanks.
Thank you so much. For my 1 minute, we've covered 7 different topics tonight, plus your introductions to us. That's valuable to us. We've covered absentee ballot, educational equity, state income taxes, the Police Accountability Act, support of legalized gambling, clean slate legislation, and public transportation. There are so many more topics one could add. The time just goes by quickly for those of us concerned about the state of Connecticut. Hopefully that's everyone. One of the things that strikes me is in these days of such difficulty with governance on the national level and perhaps coming into the state level now, it's been very good to be able to sit here and listen to different opinions, people across the aisle agreeing, disagreeing, disagreement among those on the same quote team. We're all Connecticut here, and all of you have a stake in the cities of Connecticut, be it New Britain or Bristol. We appreciate your work. It's very difficult these days. We appreciate that very much. The fact that you are on numerous Zooms, hour after hour, a difficult way to interact, but you're doing it anyway. We wish you the best. We will be there following the issues. We are all working for a better Connecticut. So thank you very much.
Follow us on Instagram at nutmeg.tv. Like us on Facebook. Search Nutmeg TV. Watch us on YouTube, Nutmeg TV, anywhere, anytime, on any device. Nutmeg TV, better programming for a better community.